Can the Preseason Player of the Year carry the Keydets higher than expected? The VMI Team Preview starts now. Okay, one of the surprises last year at the end of the season, and again, I know we've talked about this so many times, chaos happening in Nashville, but VMI and what they were able to do, they're in the run, and especially upsetting number 2 seed there in the tournament. And again, this is after a brutal 11-game losing streak for the Keydets, but Andrew Wilson, he's showcasing right now that this VMI team, they can be dangerous, and I'm interested for this season with VMI.
No, this is certainly one of the most exciting preseasons for VMI in quite some time. Certainly not since Dan Earl was there. Coach Andrew Wilson has done a fantastic job with this group. They bring back a lot from last year.
Yes.
But like you mentioned, that team just kind of figured out a way to fight at times last year. They were certainly up and down, which, is referenced by their record.
Yeah. I think I said 11-game losing streak. That's a little too harsh. It was a 10-game losing streak there in the middle of the season. So we don't want to – I know Andrew Wilson's like, hey, don't give us any more losses, right?
We
did finish 7-11 in the SoCon. So we want to maintain that record right there.
Yeah, well, where we will go 11 is they had an 11-game improvement over the previous year, which – is a big deal. I mean, that is not easy to do. I don't care if it's an 11-win improvement from winning 15 games to 25 or 2 to 17, 2 to 13. Sorry, an 11-game improvement is a big deal.
No doubt.
This team was significantly more competitive last year, and frankly, competitive doesn't even do them justice. They certainly. They won, obviously, their fair share of games in the league, and they were a tough matchup on any given night.
Yeah, I think they definitely put themselves in position in terms of other teams in the Southern Conference. They started taking notice that, okay, this is not just a VMI team that you can roll the ball out there and go out there and expect to get a win, and especially there in Lexington.
Yeah.
We know that place can be a difficult place to play just because sometimes you have to create your own energy, especially if the Keydets aren't there, those type of scenarios. But this is a team, when you look back, again, 7-11 in the SoCon, finished 7th, but made that surprise run to the semifinals there, again, knocking off number 2 UNCG. And gosh, I know, again, we talk about it with UNCG, just the struggles winning in Asheville. But you look at from an advanced metric standpoint, if you want to dive into some of the stats that we like to, in the Ken Palm, bottom 50 of the Ken Palm, and also just from a defensive standpoint, somewhat a struggle on the defensive side, bottom 25th nationally. But this team continued to fight and continued to have opportunities to put themselves in position to win. And that's why sometimes you got to be careful with the stats.
Yeah.
Because this is a team that, again, made it to the semifinals there in Asheville. So when you have some of the talent that's coming back, and obviously we're going to talk a lot about Rickey Bradley Jr. and his return and being voted preseason Conference Player of the Year. I mean, that is significant. This is the first time a VMI player has been voted preseason Player of the Year in the conference. So they don't have a history of having this type of elite talent as far as an individual player. And Rickey Bradley Jr. seems to be that guy. He's ready to embrace this opportunity and now almost getting second chances to go prove himself.
Certainly. And, we were fortunate enough to have him on your radio show during Media Day.
Yes.
And talk about an impressive young man.
No doubt.
He was sharp, locked in. He seems like he's really put the work in. A guy that I think if you're Andrew Wilson, you feel really good about where the leadership and the direction of your program with him at the head of it is. Obviously a lot of positives last year and a lot to build off of. But, talking about some of the advanced metrics, they only shot 33% from 3 last year as a team. They're going to need to improve on that, especially, we harp on it all the time, but it's an offensive-oriented league. It's a three-point shooting league.
Of course.
You're going to have to be able to do that. And then we talked initially about consistency. I think that would probably be the biggest critique I'd have of their group last year, as they were very inconsistent. They had 6 conference games that they lost by 15 points or more. And, when they were good, they were really competitive.
Yes.
But when they were not good, they really struggled. And so I really want to see if this group can be more consistent. And if they are, I think this is a group that you're going to very much need to be prepared for a battle if they are.
No doubt about it. This is not just going to be breeze through the scouting report for this team. There's no question. And I agree with you. What we see from teams that can make that step to get to that upper tier in each respective conference, regardless if it's SEC, ACC, Southern Conference, it doesn't matter. The formula is still there. You can't be inconsistent.
No.
You have to be able to ride the ebbs and flows, but have it more where you're flowing than you're ebbing, so to speak. And so for Andrew Wilson and VMI, I mean, you can't have a 10-game losing streak.
No, you just can't.
You just can't. If you want to be one of those top teams in the Southern Conference. And so I think there's an opportunity based on all of the returners they have coming back to be more consistent this year. And this is a team, and as we talked to Dean Keener on our conference preview, and he even made mention of it, and this was one of my notes, they have the second most production coming back in the entire country. Only behind Purdue. I mean, that's significant. So obviously they have the most production coming back in the Southern Conference.
Absolutely. And I think, that's something that you can't just take that with a grain of salt in this portal era.
Yes.
When you have that continuity coming back, and frankly, in the Southern Conference in particular, as we've mentioned with other teams, the vast majority of teams in this league, not only have they had turnover, but they've lost the majority of their production.
Yes.
And so for Coach Andrew Wilson to be able to bring back as much as he brought back, I think we can't underestimate that from a continuity perspective, but also from a battle-tested perspective of, look, he's got guys that have done it before in this league. Forget stats in other leagues, whether it's another mid-major or a high major or a low major or Division II. He's got guys coming back that have done it in this league before. And frankly, and he admitted this even as much when we had him on your show as well at Media Day. He's not been able to retain guys until this past year. And that just, one, speaks volume of the culture, but that is a big advantage going into conference play as the Keydets look to build.
No question about it. I can't even talk. I'm having trouble with the English language here. But what I do think also is important, the continuity aspect. And so I'm dovetailing basically what you were talking about, the returners coming back, and especially when you're running a zone offense like Andrew Wilson and being able to be comfortable and understanding everything that goes into a zone defense, because it's a little bit different. We know that, and you have to all be connected. And so I think there's something of value that you can have guys returning and being connected, because you're best defensively when you're connected and playing as a unit, especially when you're having to have zone principles involved in the defensive setting there. But you look at also what they did lose, because they did lose a very valuable player in the Southern Conference, and that's Augie Kadets, 15 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, which was the team leader.
Yeah.
And so you're losing scoring and rebounding, especially the offensive rebounding side. He was just one of those guys, had a knack on the offensive glass that would find the ball. I don't know if he understood the angles, whatever it was, but he had that knack. And as he was ranked 5th in the Southern Conference, just in offensive rebounding alone.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's a not easily replaceable loss. He had great size as well. He had some big games throughout the season additionally where he was a problem on the offensive end. And, certainly bringing back, TJ Johnson and Rickey Bradley Jr. You have pieces, but when you can kind of have a third guy, that's when you can really differentiate yourself as a team, especially in conference play, when maybe one or two guys are not having their best nights. When you've got that third guy, that can be a difference maker. So he is certainly going to be a big loss, as it relates to their ability to kind of build off last year.
That's right. Well, but you do have the guy coming back who carried the team. And that's Rickey Bradley Jr. 16.3 points per game, almost 5 rebounds per game, almost 3 assists per game. And also, this guy is a defender also. I mean, he averaged almost 1.5 steals per game. And he is a workhorse type of guy in terms of he's going to give you a lot of minutes, but he was efficient when he was out there. And I think that's what allowed him to get all of the recognition that he deserved at the end of the season. All tournament team there in Asheville. And then now, obviously, the coaches are recognize it. But also, as we talked to Dean, there is something to be said. And this is no shot to add Rickey Bradley Jr. because I do think he's deserving of it. But with the transfer portal and so many guys coming out of the league and then newcomers coming in, it's hard to evaluate the talent within some of these teams. But we do know that Rickey Bradley Jr., he's a known commodity. So why not go ahead and look at him as preseason conference player of the year?
No, certainly. And I mean, look, you mentioned it. He had a great year last year. He led that team. And that was a team that, like you mentioned as well, made the semifinals in the Southern Conference Tournament in Asheville. So has built some momentum. I do think it'll be interesting to see this year how teams choose to defend him and, how many guys get sent to him on a regular and consistent basis, and how he's going to be able to respond to that. But, certainly deserving of the recognition that he has gotten this preseason.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, you already mentioned TJ Johnson coming back. This guy did average 12 points per game, almost 5 rebounds per game, 37% three-point shooter, so he's a versatile type of scorer. And here's one that could be an outlier. I'm interested because this guy seems to be the epitome of just one of those type of guards that will get under your skin. Yeah. And that's Tan Ildizaglu, and Pacific transfer that came in to VMI. And he's one of those guys that's almost like an Energizer bunny rabbit, just always going full steam, all of that. The struggle, though, is not a good outside shooter, and you're going to have to be able to convert from beyond the arc, especially in this league. I mean, I know it's a recurring theme. We talk about it, but it's so true.
No, it really is. And I think what potentially even emphasizes that more for this group is the fact that Rickey Bradley is going to receive a lot more attention when he has the ball in his hand. And frankly, he is a guy that typically he is a high volume ball handler. I mean, he has the ball in his hands a lot in that offense. And when he's potentially having a second guy sent at him, the ability to have somebody that can spread the floor is going to be really important. So it'll be interesting to see how they adjust on the perimeter. But he is certainly a high energy wing piece that will be able to, on the defensive end in particular, I would think, really provide a spark. And then offensively, can he be a better cutter? How can you get him involved? Yeah. Does he take a step forward as a shooter this year? And do we see him be able to stretch the floor a little bit? I do think that's where having TJ Johnson being a good deep threat, kind of putting him and Rickey Bradley into some action together,
no doubt,
and seeing how you can free up Rickey Bradley in some ball screen sets. Where, look, if you put 2 on the ball there, or you put too much of a focus on Bradley, TJ Johnson's there. So it will be interesting. But to your point, overall, they're going to have to improve. And we mentioned it earlier. They're going to have to improve as a 3-point shooting team if they want to take that next step.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Ildizaglu, again, he's that guy that, again, he's got that chip on his shoulder almost. It's just there's something about it. And I think there's maybe even something to all of the Keydets that play for VMI. They have this chip on their shoulder wanting to prove that, we do belong, even, how people view VMI. But if you look back, go back in history, back to the late 70s, I mean, VMI was a hell of a team in college basketball. I mean, this is a team that at least has had some success. It's just been a long time, but I think they were always, or for so long, we viewed them as such a David versus Goliath, such an underdog type of team in the Southern Conference.
No, and I think that's really the mindset and the shift that you're going to see with everybody else in the league now. And Dean, referenced this when we talked with him, is that at least at home, you felt pretty good that if you showed up and you had, your B game, you were probably going to be able to walk out with a win. And that's certainly not the case.
No, not
with
anymore.
This group.
No, it's not.
You're going to have to be locked in to beat this group. And that's a testament to Coach Wilson and what he's been able to build culturally here. And frankly, Rickey Bradley Jr.'s ability to kind of kind of take the program to the next level.
That's right. And another guy who I think is a physical guard, we know he's an elite on-ball defender, and that's A.J. Clark, second in the conference in steals at almost 2 steals per game and all defensive selection for the Southern Conference. So this is a guy who will also be leaned on quite a bit on the defensive side.
Yeah, I think for them, setting the tone defensively is going to be really huge for them.
Yeah.
And if they don't necessarily take a big jump in three-point shooting, they're going to have to generate some turnovers. They're going to have to generate some easy offense so that they can get up and down a little bit and not necessarily always have to play in the half court. And so I think you make a really good point there of having some defensive grittiness to be able to force some turnovers to create some easy offense.
Yeah. Now, they do have a transfer from Wake Forest, Mason Hagedorn, 6'9". So at 6'9", again, it's size. You can't coach that.
No.
Now, again, being fully transparent, I don't know enough as far as what his ceiling can be, what he can provide for VMI. But again, at 6'9", if you can get any type of production, get some minutes from somebody that size, that helps significantly.
Oh, certainly it does, and I'm with you. Unfortunately, I don't know too much about him, but with that size, again, I go back to, this doesn't necessarily stretch the floor, but can you get him with that size and some ball screen action with Rickey Bradley Jr. to help kind of free him up? And look, when you have that kind of size inside, if he can be a good screener and a good roller, you're going to get him some easy buckets, and you could potentially get him going. But we mentioned a rebounding void for this group.
Yeah, that's right. Can you get some of that?
Can you get some of that back here?
That's right.
And in that zone defense, can that be a guy that you can kind of put in the middle there and give you some rim protection and fill up some space and bump some cutters and just make things a little bit more difficult for the opposing offense?
Yeah. And there's something interesting, too. When you look at Andrew Wilson, and Dean talked about it also, this story, as far as the improvement that they've been able to have from last year, from 2 years ago to last year, and then now can they have another improvement? Because there's no doubt it has to be so difficult to coach at VMI. I mean, because of the challenges that you have, because of the institution, the military commitments, all of those things. And I don't know if we're giving Andrew Wilson enough credit. I think he should be given even more credit based on the job that he's been able to do so far.
No, certainly. Look, I mean, I'm not sure there's a more difficult job at the Division I level than at VMI. And I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but I'm not sure there's a whole lot of programs out there that saw a double-digit turnaround record last year. And another really interesting piece that's unique to VMI of kind of what you were talking about, they don't have nearly as much time with these guys as every other staff pretty much in the country.
Yeah.
These guys have a rigorous class schedule. They get work throughout the day now. And so they just can't pop into the gym when they feel like it and get some shots up, get an individual workout in. They can't necessarily string a practice out for 3 or 4 hours that includes film and individual work. These guys have to be very regimented, very disciplined. This is really, Dean brought it up, and you reemphasized it. This has the makings really of a national storyline here. And I'm excited to see if they can continue to build off what they did last year.
All right, schedule-wise, how are they looking non-conference schedule? Again, I know we can focus so much on the Southern Conference schedule, and that's obviously the most important. Yeah. But this is an opportunity, again, where you can start understanding how your team is going to be. You get some experience, you get some continuity going. And again, it already helps that you have so many returners coming back for Coach Wilson. But again, with the non-conference, there's also times where you're going to have to go play some of the high majors. Certainly. It's just the reality of it here at this level of mid-major basketball. But anything that, just from a perspective of, okay, that's an interesting schedule.
Certainly. Look, highlighting these with the high majors, you got to go to Missouri, and you got to go to Missouri pretty early. So that's going to be a really interesting test.
Yeah.
Coach Gates has done a good job at Missouri. They will probably be ready to go for that one.
They'll be physical.
Yeah. So that one stands out. You go to UCF, so you get another high major opponent in the Big 12, and that'll be a challenge. And that is on the back end of the Skechers Fort Myers tip-off, where they'll get an opportunity, which this should be a fun matchup against the Buffalo team that, has been down since Bobby Hurley and Nate Oates have left there. So you'd think that would be a very winnable contest, and maybe build some momentum there in an MTE. But some very winnable games. I mean, I don't look at their schedule and say, hey, man, I mean, this is going to be a real slog, obviously, other than potentially the high major games. I think their first Division I game, they opened up 9-1 against Johnson and Wells. But I'm actually really intrigued. They're going to Evansville to play at Southern Indiana. And I think that'll be a really good test for them, an Ohio Valley opponent. Yeah. I look for them to be favored in that game. And I think that'll be a really good test early on to say, look, is this VMI team a team that can go on the road early?
That's right.
And get a non-conference win against, another mid-major type opponent.
Yeah, I think there's something also that there's so many of us as we're looking at VMI, we're intrigued. Okay, can this VMI team be different? Can they continue improving? Because they've got the pieces that you would think based on the production coming back, all of that. So can they be that type of team? Can they go on the road, as you mentioned? But there's also, I know we've talked about it too, just from the perspective of in the Southern Conference, though, it's still relative to the other teams because the other teams, how well they play. And again, there's so many unanswered questions in terms of how these rosters are going to fit together. But I think when you're looking at this team overall, I mean, we know it's going to rely heavily on Bradley's ability to create and get him the open looks. Can you get him intimately involved, game night in, night out, I should say. And then also, then can a guy like a TJ Johnson, can he have another step? Because to your point, there's going to be so much focus on Bradley.
Yeah.
Can he be that guy, that secondary scorer, that secondary shooter there to relieve some of that pressure where Bradley doesn't have to do everything?
Yeah, and to me, that's what I had written down for my X factor is I think if VMI is going to be able to take that next step and try to get into that upper tier of the conference this year, I think TJ Johnson's got to have a big year because I think I'm pretty confident that Rickey Bradley Jr. is going to be Rickey Bradley Jr. Now, he's certainly going to see more attention than he did last year from teams defensively, schematically. But I really think that TJ Johnson's got to be – he's got to solidify himself certainly as their number two. And then to touch just lastly on the Southern Conference, you mentioned this – I'm sorry. You mentioned the Southern Conference opponents. They're going to get tested really quickly early. They open up at home against Chat, and then they have to go – I'm sorry, they open up at home against Sanford and then have Chat at home, and then they have to go to East Tennessee State and then go to Furman.
Oh, wow.
So
that might be the toughest beginning game for Southern Conference schedule we've seen.
I think so. And so, I kind of butchered that. So to repeat it, they go home Sanford, home Chattanooga, at ETSU, at Furman. I don't know if there's a tougher 4-game stretch. I mean, the reality is on paper, preseason, those are probably the top 4 teams in the league in no particular order.
Yes.
So they're going to get tested right away.
They are. And so, if you're Andrew Wilson, if you're VMI, I mean, can you come out of there 2-2? That would be significant if you could come out of the gates 2-2. And that's going to be a challenge, though.
No, it is.
That, again, I think we'll start to see some teams gelling, but there also could be a situation where some of these teams, based on the transfers coming in and everything with the revolving door, so to speak, we might not see some of these teams really get into their groove until February.
Yeah.
And that's maybe, VMI has the opportunity of, can you catch some of these teams early enough in the conference slate that, you can surprise some of these teams.
That's a great point. And I completely agree with you on both fronts, addressing the trying to get out of there 2-2. If you can get out of there 2-2, I think you are in a really good spot moving forward because you have knocked out 4 of the toughest games on your conference schedule. No, and so that would be a huge win for them if they can get out of there 2-2 to put themselves in a spot to jump into that next tier. Addressing the second point, I completely agree with you on. Look, all 3 of those 4 teams, I should say, have almost an entirely new roster, generally speaking.
That's right.
If they haven't fully gelled at that point, does this work to their advantage?
Exactly.
Where, look, you catch 2 or 3 of these teams when they're just not necessarily hitting their full stride yet. Yes, there's talent there, but you've brought continuity back. You have a group that's been through a Southern Conference schedule before. Can you sneak away with something here where you catch 1 or 2 of these groups early?
Yeah.
That's a great point.
No, and that's why, on paper, you're looking at it if you're a VMI fan and saying, hey, Dr. Michael Cross, commissioner of the SoCon, what in the world are you doing to us with this schedule? Yes, are you kidding me? But there's many more layers to this than just what you see on paper. And that's why even there's so many layers with what we can envision success for VMI, because it's going to come down to, as we just talked about, Rickey Bradley Jr. and can you fix a defense that was in the bottom 25th or bottom 25 nationally, and can you have somebody fill the void of Augie there in terms of the rebounding? And you're going to have those things come together if you want to truly be a contender in the SoCon.
No, 100%. I mentioned it before. I think you certainly have to have 2 go-to players on your roster that can really go get you what you need on any given night. But if you can add that 3rd guy into the mix, I think that's when you can really start to separate yourself. And obviously, as we talked about, who can step up and be the definitive number 2, and certainly who can fill that role that Augie had is, and essentially be that 3rd guy this year. Not to say that he was the 3rd guy last year, but who can be that 3rd guy in the mix?
The floor. What do we say the floor is for VMI? They finished 7th last year.
I'm bullish on this group.
Yes.
So I genuinely think floor is 6 for them. Look, I still think they could have a really good year and somehow some things shake out and they finish 7th. But I had written down, I think their floor is 6. I like what they're building there, and I just think if they can get that 3rd piece and shore up some things defensively, I like what this group can potentially do.
Yeah, I agree. I think 6 is the floor. Again, maybe you dip down to 7 if the defense doesn't improve or if there's some injury, that maybe Rickey Bradley Jr. misses some time, whatever it might be. And obviously, hopefully that doesn't happen.
Right.
I want to see all of these elite players play every single game. I don't want any injuries because I want to get a better measurement of what these teams are.
Yeah.
And that's obviously things that are out of the control. Then when you turn to the ceiling, though, where do you think this team can go? Because this is the real question about VMI.
Yeah.
They have the pieces there. It'd be hard-pressed to go below 7 as long as everybody stays healthy. But the real question is, how high can they go?
Yeah, and as bullish as I am on this group, I think if they can get to 4th this year, I think that's an incredible achievement for a team that, really 2 years prior struggled to win a game in the league. Yeah. So I think they're going to have a hard time getting above 4, but I don't think 4 is unrealistic if the pieces come together the way that they're anticipating that they do there in Lexington.
I'm dangling between 3 and 4. And the reason I say 3 is if there's something where one of those teams, a Samford or an ETSU or a Chattanooga, or something just doesn't go right, and then everything lines up for VMI. But realistically, I would say a fourth. And if you can finish fourth in the Southern Conference, are you kidding me?
Look, you finish fourth in the league, you have a legitimate chance going into Asheville.
No doubt. Yes, exactly. Because we know how important it is. If you can be one of the top 4 seeds,
Yes.
I mean, it sets yourself up that opportunity of quickly getting right there to the semifinals.
Yep.
So there is something significant about that. So I'm anxious to see this season. We've talked about several of the coaches, just absolutely fantastic coaches in the Southern Conference.
Absolutely.
And Andrew Wilson is one of the best. And I'm not talking about just necessarily X's and O's. We know that already. But I'm just talking about the time we spent with him.
He's a great guy.
He's absolutely fantastic, just a great individual. And so I'm anxious to see what the Keydets can do this year.
I am too. And, I mean, you talk about getting one of the top seeds where you don't have to play that first day. Look, when was the last time that VMI didn't have to play on day one?
Yeah, that seems every single year.
And so that alone, just from a mental perspective, going into Asheville, knowing, look, guys, we only have to win 3 games.
Yeah.
Right? That's still not an easy task.
No, it's not.
But there's a massive difference. You know this.
It's easier than winning 4.
Massive difference winning 4. And actually, I don't know under the current format, I don't think anyone has won. I think Furman, like 10, 12 plus years ago, made a run.
They made it to the final
championship game and just completely ran out of gas.
Yeah.
But I think that may be the only time it has even gotten to that point. So, I mean, to be able to have a bye that first round, even for VMI, look, you have to be going into Asheville thinking like, man, we're chomping at the bit here.
No question. All right, that is the VMI Keydets team preview. And you know the drill. Remember, hit that subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast, including the iHeartRadio app. Until next time, may all your jumpers hit nothing but the bottom of the net.